I am so excited to introduce you to our next guest, Brian Moran. He is the Secretary of Public Safety and Homeland Security since 2014. He was also a member of the Virginia House of Delegates, representing Northern Virginia's 46th district. He was a candidate for governor in Virginia in 2009, a primary candidate. And Brian is a dear friend. He, in fact, I'm the official Moran chicken babysitter. They have chickens, and also I've had the pleasure of knowing Brian Moran's brother, who was a member of Congress for many years. Please welcome. Good morning, Brian. How are you?
I'm very well. Thank you for the kind introduction. How are you, Mark?
Good. Thank you so much for joining us. And are you still growing strawberries and other wonderful things in your garden?
Well, I've had much better success with the chickens.
There you
chickens
go.
Are doing wonderfully. They're still laying eggs, and they've become real pets. The garden, for some reason, has not flourished, and it's frustrating because I go through a lot of work getting the garden ready with the rototilling and the fertilizing, but I'm looking at it, in fact, right now at my window, and there's just a whole lot of weeds, and it hasn't done well.
Well, you and I both love our chickens. They have unique. I keep telling everyone that they each have their own personality, but some of my friends that just haven't been around chickens don't believe me when I tell them that they do have their own personalities, don't they?
Well, I couldn't agree more with you. They really do. They're wonderful pets, and they actually produce something.
So, they do.
I would encourage people to have them. They're wonderful.
And doesn't the governor's mansion have some chickens now in the backyard, or at least
Governor McAuliffe and Dorothy did, and I don't know whether or not Governor Northam and Pam Northam have continued that practice or not. To be honest with you, they did have some chickens, and they're doing well, but I don't know.
If they don't have any, I'm gonna bring them some, because I just think what a great addition to the governor's mansion.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, they're really into food sustainability, and it's a great issue, and they're doing a lot of work on making sure kids are well fed at school so they can learn. So a lot of those issues around food and nutrition, and eggs, fresh eggs is nothing like them.
That's
so
exactly
it's a nice
right.
thing to encourage.
Well, Brian, one of the things I wanted to talk to you about, there's been on both sides of the aisle a lot of behavior that is really concerning. And so as we approach the November elections, I believe it was Warner had a brick thrown through his office, I believe. Is that right? And we have, members of the administration, being harassed. And so what I wanted to do was just take a few moments to talk about, the difference between, what is, activism, that is the protected sound of freedom, peaceful protest versus, taking it too far to where it violates somebody's rights and privacy. And just because I think a lot of viewers, they have an idea that because somebody is an elected official, that basically anything goes. Call them anything name you want. Basically anything goes, because once you get into public office, then you've given up your freedom, your right to privacy, and I just was hoping you could just maybe educate everyone about really the difference, because there really is a difference. And the gentleman that threw the brick through Warner's office, I think he was arrested, right? They caught him and he was arrested.
Yeah, and he'll be prosecuted. I mean, I got a lot of feelings about it, having been in this position for 5 years, and then also being an elected official, and the people's belief that all of a sudden that you surrender so many, your ability for privacy and your family and your feelings.
That's right. That's exactly right.
Social media has a lot. I mean, my goodness, I know you're on social media a lot. And
yes.
I follow you, but what people feel empowered to write and say on social media, it's very, very troubling for someone who didn't grow up with that. In how that has allowed as a mechanism of media for communication, I'm just not comfortable with it still. But let me speak specifically to a couple of things. In this position, I look at it from a public safety point of view.
Right.
And it places law enforcement in a difficult predicament that they are called upon, of course, to ensure the safety of the greater community as well as the protesters themselves, both protesters and counter-protesters. And we painfully, tragically saw that last year in Charlottesville, where, you had 1,000 white supremacist rally for Unite the Right rally, and then you had twice that number of counter-protesters, right. And, it led to violence. And so this year we are taking, again, unprecedented preparations. The state police have just done a wonderful job, and they're organizing and communicating very closely with the city of Charlottesville. So nothing like, we're capable of allowing peaceful demonstrations if people are willing to be peaceful, and we'll allow that. But right. If they're not, then we're going to impose, our will and separate them and make arrests if need be. But it places our law enforcement in a very difficult spot. That's, but we got to ensure First Amendment rights. But you got to wonder, once you become violent, I think your First Amendment rights are sacrificed, and you're no longer peacefully protesting. And so we have our officers trained in that quite a bit: constitutional law, First Amendment rights. But it's a very challenging proposition for our law enforcement, and it's very, frankly, it's pretty frustrating because the level of vitriol right now that exists is certainly challenging to us. And I wish everybody would just take a deep breath and not express their feelings in a way that leads to violence.
Right. That's exactly right. And, I'm a huge advocate for the freedom of speech. It's one of the building foundations of what makes our nation so great, the ability to have peaceful protest. It is the sound of freedom. But, that doesn't include, I know what it's like to have a brick thrown through a glass door. It's expensive. There's little pieces of charred glass everywhere. It's also terrifying. And, to what end? What does that achieve? You throwing a brick through somebody's glass door, or terrorizing somebody when they're trying to have a meal, or, how does that advance your policy issue? Or how does that...
I don't think it's it's not an effective
right.
means, but
That's
I
right.
think you turn off most independent thinking, the folks you want to influence in their opinion, when they see you expressing views in a violent fashion. I think it turns them off, and in fact turns them against your position. But I don't know, in this atmosphere, people don't seem to care.
Right.
On both sides, they're just so dang, as I say, vitriolic. They're mean-spirited, but it's not an effective means of speech. I find a persuasive argument to be one that can be civilly provided, well articulated, right. and uses evidence.
Right.
In public safety, we have a lot of controversial issues.
Sure.
A lot of controversial issues arise, and rather than using emotion or fear, we try to make decisions based on evidence.
Right.
What does our experience tell us? What works? What doesn't work? That way you can defend your position.
That's right.
Because inevitably it will get criticized. No matter what you do, one way or the other,
That's right.
somebody will criticize you. And you better be able to substantiate or support that decision with evidence. And that's the philosophy we have adopted, and it seems to be working. But anyway, it is a frustrating. I wish just people would again articulate their positions in a peaceful and civil manner. I think it would
right.
be far more effective.
That's right, because if you want to get, it's the difference between getting your message across and getting, in some cases, attention. I think some people do these crazy things because they want attention versus, really advocating for whatever the cause is, whatever the policy issue is. And, so many elected officials, all across the country, not just in Virginia, but, they're getting death threats. And, that doesn't advance the cause of liberty. That doesn't advance somebody's policy issue, whatever that issue is, by threatening somebody's life. And it's taken very seriously, isn't it, Brian? I mean, these death threats, people think, oh, well, this is an elected person. I can threaten their life and there'll be no ramifications. That's just not the case, is it?
That is not the case, no. And we follow them up. In fact, we just had one yesterday with respect to the governor, and state police follows it up. Fortunately, most of them just turn out to be somebody, off the, just acting foolish. But they're all taken seriously. You can't afford not to in this day and age.
Of course.
You have to follow these things up, and we do, and we take them all very seriously.
Well, I want everybody to be safe. I mean, I'm an activist myself. I believe in the freedom of speech and the ability to, passionately advocate for your policy issue is important. It's one of our greatest freedoms in our country. I wanted to have this show because I really want folks to be safe, and also if you start to see friends, talking about behavior that is illegal, which includes, threats, threatening somebody's life, violence, vandalism, inciting violence, to make sure that you have a conversation with them, to make sure that everybody's safe, and we can, really keep our community safe that way. And I want to thank you, Brian, for everything you do and your office does.
Well, I appreciate that, Martha, and I would encourage folks, as we prepare for next weekend, August, the anniversary, we remember the young lady who died, 32-year-old young woman, Heather Heyer. We remember two wonderful state troopers who lost their lives in the helicopter crash, and we remember those who were injured. And if folks are planning to come to, and I'd ask them not to come to Charlottesville, but if they do, we really ask them to be peaceful. Articulate your message if you need to, but do it in a very peaceful way. And we will be ready for any violence. Our state police will have certainly Charlottesville PD and others to be ready if it isn't. And it's unfortunate that we have to deal with that. There's an expense to it. Taxpayers have to pay for this, but we're going to ensure the safety of the citizens of Charlottesville and others who come to this wonderful city. And we would just ask everybody to exercise their First Amendment rights in a way that is peaceful.
Absolutely. Well, thank you for everything you do. You keep us safe, and I want to thank you for coming on the show to talk about this, and we hope to have you on soon.
Good to talk to you, Martha. Thank you.
Thank you so much.